Naturally, it was raining. Not a gentle rain, but the kind of icy downpour found only at haunted houses, and Glenmore Castle was the perfect place for a haunting. It was one of those old stone castles that dot the eastern coast of Scotland. The whole colourful and violent history of the Celts and the Scots seemed to be etched in its austere towers. Not exactly the sunny spot John and Emma Steele had hoped for as they planned their next vacation, but when she won the trip in a contest, it seemed that fate had made the decision for them. Now standing before the castle in all its menace, she wondered whose side fate was really on. The rain drenched them as they watched the taxi disappear into the night. Shadows of their turrets overhead covered them like hands of doom as they scurried through the front gate. But at the door, John hesitated before rapping the ornate brass knocker. It was all so trite, he thought. A cliché from a late-night movie. He already knew what would happen. The door would creak, the wind would hoot, a bald butler would guide them by candlelight through the cobwebs. There would be a curse, a ghost, a murder. It was all so predictable he had to laugh. "Funny," Emma said, wringing her hair like a sponge. "You think this is funny?" "You don't?" he asked. "The situation, doesn't it remind you of something?" "It reminds me exactly of one of our vacations, one where you get blamed for murder. Promise me that won't happen this time." "Are you getting bored of it all, my dear?" John asked, smiling with his best phony smile. "Not bored, darling," she said just as fraudulently. "Just tired of getting you off the hook." Suddenly, the huge wooden door creaked open. No need to knock, John thought. The owners of the house had seen the same movie, but that wasn't quite true. For one thing, the person who answered the door wasn't bald. She was a pleasant, lively woman in her 50s, and she had elegant, silvery grey hair. "Ah," she said, looking at the Steeles miserably. "You look like you drowned geese. The two of you, come in and get to the fire quick. You'll catch your death out this." She ushered them into the great room of the castle. As expected, there was a long medieval table in the centre, and beyond it, a walk-in fireplace with a crackling fire. Overstuffed armchairs glowed in the firelight. There was even an elaborate display of axes and swords nearby, and an immense faded tapestry on the far wall. But there were also a few surprises. The room was lit not by creepy candles, but by a high-tech set of halogen tracks installed in scaffolding. A fancy CD system was playing soft jazz. There was a widescreen TV in the corner, and a cellular phone on the small table. It was a perfect mix of the ages. Chivalry meets technology. "It's a blasted hell of a night for travelling," the woman said as she helped John and Emma peel off their wet clothes. "Not for us," Emma said brightly. "This is our kind of vacation. The gloomier the better." "She means your castle is very interesting," John said, trying to cloak the joke. "That it is," said the woman. "I'm sure you'll find your stay very interesting indeed. I'm Mary Duncan MacLeod, the lady of the house, you might say." "Emma and John," Emma said, shaking hands. "Why don't you sit by the fire and warm yourselves? I'll fix you up with a toddy and some biscuits. Come and let me introduce you." Entering the room, Mary motioned to three other people who were sitting in the chairs by the fire. "This is Ian McCourtney," Mary began. The man who shook John's hand immediately looked suspicious, like a weasel in a kilt. His nose even twitched as he said hello. Emma made a mental note of him. He was a fine suspect for a crime she was convinced lay ahead. "John and Emma," John said. "And this is my wife, Anita," McCourtney said, nodding to a woman standing behind him. She was a flirtatious woman in a bright red dress, with too much makeup and too little class. "Pleased," she squeaked. but didn't seem pleased at all. Second suspect, Emma thought. Made for the part, Emma was busy inventing a sinister plot about her when a third person chimed in. "Charmed. I'm bloody damn well sure," said a woman rising unsteadily from the chair. "Don't mind her," Mary said kindly. "She had one too many, as usual. John and Emma Steele. This is Tina Conache. Tina, please try and behave yourself, just for the weekend." "I always behave myself," Tina slurred. "It's everyone else that's intolerable." The mood among the others was chilly, to say the least, but as Mary MacLeod left the room to prepare the drinks, all traces of warmth went with her, and a stinging silence filled the gap. It was Ian McCourtney who, fiddling with an old lantern that sat on the mantelpiece, finally broke the spell. "Are you here for the reading then?" he asked bluntly. "No," Emma answered politely. "We do plenty of reading at home. We're here for the scenery." "He means the bloody reading, of course, of the bloody Covenant," Tina explained. "You two are American, aren't you? I didn't know they were Americans." "Oh, sure," Emma said, still trying to be friendly. "Since about 1776. "I mean in the family," Tina said sharply. "I didn't know we had American cousins." "They're not family," Mary shouted. She had returned hastily with a tray of cups and a serving dish. "And they're not here for the Covenant. They're guests. Now stop your pestering." "Guests?" Tina said with a laugh. "And why the bloody hell would they want to stay here?" "Quiet," Mary said to her. "Isn't it time for you to pass out or something?" "Actually, we won a trip in a contest," Emma said cheerily. "A contest?" Anita McCourtney said as she twirled a ring nervously around her finger. "For a weekend at a haunted house?" "No, for Kirkland's Scottish oatmeal," Emma explained. "This place is haunted, you know," Ian McCourtney said. "Have you never heard of the ghost of Glenmore Castle?" At that, the music that had been playing softly in the background was overwhelmed by a horrible screeching sound coming from one of the outer rooms. Everyone jumped at the noise. "The ghost?" Emma asked. "My husband," Mary muttered, pointing to the doorway. The man standing there was a very image of the laird of the castle. He was a proud Scot, tall and straight, wearing a suit jacket and tie as well as a colourful kilt and high socks. The bagpipes he was playing complemented the ensemble, but the sour sound coming from them destroyed any authenticity. "Sorry," he said, putting the instrument down on the table and letting the airbag wheeze. "I thought it would make a handsome impression. Never could quite get the hang of the thing, though. Hello, I'm Kenneth MacLeod, 7th Laird of Glenmore. Been spooking you with tales of the Bruce, have they? Don't believe a word of it." "How sweet," Emma said. "The ghost's name is Bruce?" "Aye," MacLeod went on. He had taken out a small knife and was carving a tiny piece of wood with it. "He was our ancestor, Bruce of Glenmore. A real true Highlander. Fought against the British with bonny Prince Charlie, he did." "Fought with everyone, he did," Ian McCourtney added. "The man was a crook and a swindler. Runs in the family." "Your side, to be sure," Tina said, her tongue getting looser by the minute. "Ian's an ex-convict, you see. Tried to steal money from his company to pay off his gangster pals. How much did you embezzle him? Was it $500,000? "Look who's talking," Anita shot back, defending her husband. "Tina Cognac, if it wasn't for the family money, you'd be in prison for gambling debts by now." "That will be enough of that, cousins," MacLeod said loudly. "None of us would be here if it weren't for the Bruce. Let's remember that and show a wee bit of respect." "You're all cousins?" John asked, trying not to sound as sorry for them as he felt. "Aye, we've been gathering for the reading of the Covenant," MacLeod explained. We're the last surviving blood members of the Glenmore clan. Ian's first cousin, and Tina's my stepsister. What about the other guests? Emma asked. There aren't any, Mary answered. She had forced a cup of toddy on her husband and was watching him intently, as if she expected some fateful outcome from his first sip. She appeared disappointed when all he did was burn his tongue. Are you trying to scold me, woman? He said, recoiling. Poison, more likely, Anita mumbled. The castle's closed for the weekend, Mary said quickly, trying to change the subject. You two are the only guests. Bit of a foul-up on that, but no harm done. What is this covenant you talk about? Emma asked. The covenant is an ancient document, MacLeod explained, putting the cup down and pacing before the fire. Drawn up in 1742 by our ancestors, it's been in a vault and guarded all this time, so they say, by the ghost of Bruce of Glenmore, to prevent anyone stealing from the clan. You can hear him howl on the first day of each year. Only then? Emma asked. Aye, he did howl in June one year, but that was when one of our cousins tried to break into the vault. He turned up dead in the morning the next day. Wasn't it Bruce that killed cousin Roddy? Anita suggested. 'Twas the other spirits, whiskey and rum. Tomorrow, MacLeod went on, is the 250th anniversary of the Covenant. According to custom, it will be read aloud for the first time. What does it say? That he gets the estate, Ian McCourtney scowled, nodding towards Kenneth, being the eldest male cousin. Unless he dies first, Mary MacLeod added calmly, in which case it's all divided up between us. No one knows that for sure, MacLeod replied. None of us have read the Covenant yet. Aye, cousin, so you've always said, Ian replied sharply. Each January the 1st, Kenneth explained, I go into the vault to say a prayer for our ancestors. In the dark, that's the custom. But I've never looked at the Covenant. I swear by the Bruce. In other words, if you died tonight, Emma said, they split up the castle. She didn't mean to sound quite so cold about it. She was simply caught up in the intrigue of the situation and was trying to get her clues straight. She tried a sweet smile to soften the impact, but it didn't quite work. There's a bloody good question. Give that lass a drink, Tina Cognac said, practically spilling hers on Emma's lap. That's what we'd all like to know, my lovely. Do we get the castle if cousin Kenneth bites the dust? Aye, MacLeod said loudly. If that's what the Covenant says, the castle as well as the sabre. Why don't you show our guests the book? Ian suggested. MacLeod walked over to the bookcase, next to the arms displayed on the wall. Ian McCourtney seemed to hold his breath as Kenneth reached for something on the shelf. But when MacLeod simply withdrew a leather book and handed it to John, McCourtney exhaled in expiration. The book was quite old and fragile. The text inside was handwritten and included a number of black ink drawings showing utensils, coins, scepters, and a few fancy crosses. But the most striking drawing showed a ceremonial saber encrusted with gems. According to a note in the text, one of the gems was a rare purple sapphire belonging to Prince Charles Edward Stuart. Nice knife, John said, pointing to the picture. And it's worth as much as the castle itself, the laird said. It's called the Skene Jacobitus, or the Jacobite sabre. It was given to the Bruce by Prince Charles himself, for his help during the Jacobite uprising. That was before the tragic Battle of Culloden Moor, of course. MacLeod gazed sadly at the sporran, the traditional Scottish bag that he wore on a chain suspended from his waist. and he observed a moment of silence in honour of the battle that had ended the Scottish revolt from England. As Kenneth returned the book, Ian McCourtney again seemed to lean forward in anticipation, waiting for something to happen, and this time his attention was rewarded. Replacing the book on the shelf seemed to trigger a vibration. It caused one of the ceremonial axes on the wall to come loose from its mount. The axe came swinging down like a guillotine. It narrowly missed MacLeod as it landed on the rug with a lethal whomp. "That was close, cousin," McCourtney said flatly, as though he were describing a soccer goal. "Heavens," the laird said, trying to regain his composure. "Perhaps I should be heading off to bed." "Beheading is a good way of putting it," John whispered. "Been too many strange incidents around here lately," Kenneth said as he left. "Like my ring of keys. They seem to be missing. I left them on the table here earlier. Anita, you were the first up this morning. You didn't take them, did you?" "And what would I want with your rusty old keys?" she asked. But the innocence in her manner was clearly an act, not a fact. "Leave all that to us," Mary said cheerily to John and Emma. "You two must be bone-tired. Let me show you to your room." The room she took them to was on the second floor of the castle. It too was a perfect blend of Celtic ancestry and modern comfort. The fire burning in the small stove fireplace was from a compressed log. A luxurious four-poster bed had an electric blanket, and there was even a TV in the room, hidden in an old wooden cabinet with runes on the doors. "What a miserable bunch of people," John said as he joined Emma under the thick plaid comforter. "But a perfect setup for a whodunit. They all stand to gain from the laird's death." "I thought you'd had enough of all that," John said. "Only when you're the one who done it." The soft light from the candle combined with the sound of the rain to produce a tranquil effect, and in no time at all they fell into a deep sleep. But it didn't last long. "What was that?" Emma said as she shot up into a sitting position. John, still asleep, simply snorted. "John!" she said, jabbing him in the elbow to wake him up. "Did you hear that?" "Did you hear the sound?" "What sound?" he muttered, his voice muffled by the quilt. "It was horrible, like some kind of howl." "Bagpipes," he muttered, but may have been talking in his dream. "It wasn't that kind of sound. It was ghastly. I think it was the ghost of Glenmore Castle." "I didn't hear a thing," John said, laying on a thick Scottish brogue. "Get back to bed, lassie." The light under the door flickered for an instant as someone or something passed by in the hallway. John was snoring again. Emma listened for a while, but heard nothing more, so she tried to go back to sleep instead. That was impossible. Not with one eye wide open and her hands clenched into tight fists ready to fight the spectre when it came in. It was well past dawn when they found the body. The groundskeeper had arrived to find the door to the cellar open. Investigating further, he came upon a grisly scene, then raced through the house to wake everyone. When they heard the commotion, John and Emma quickly followed the others down into the cellar, past the wine racks, through two old stone corridors, to the vault where the sabre and the covenant were kept. The thick plank door to the vault was partly open. A kerosene lantern had been smashed on the floor before it, and a suit of armour overturned. Next to that, Kenneth MacLeod, 7th Laird of Glenmore, was lying. He had been stabbed. The blood that pooled out of the wound seemed to form a question mark on the floor, a sinister sign of murder. "It's the ghost," the groundskeeper said. "The ghost of Bruce has killed Master Kenneth." "Oh, shut up, you fool," Ian McCourtney said. He had a bandage on his finger that Emma hadn't noticed before. "Did anyone call the constable?" Mary MacLeod asked. She was standing in the shadows wiping her eyes with a white lace hanky. Considering the circumstances, she seemed remarkably composed. "I did, ma'am," the groundskeeper said. "He'll be here directly." As a matter of habit, the groundskeeper started to tidy things up, including something lying on the floor inside the vault, which he went to pick up. It was the Jacobite saber, the only object out of place in the vault room. "Don't move anything," Tina Cognac said. "You'll spoil the constable's fun. Fancies himself a Scotland Yard type." "She's right," John Steele said. "It's all evidence. You better leave everything where it is." Steele had a strange feeling of foreboding about the whole affair. Perhaps it was the tightness of the cellar in which they were standing, but he felt as though he was caught in it, whether he wanted to be or not. A glance at Emma didn't ease the feeling. She was standing stiffly near the body, saying nothing. "Why did the laird come down here in the middle of the night?" John asked. "I've no idea," Mary said. "How would she know?" Anna McCourtney suggested. "They haven't slept together in 6 years. She's in the west wing, Kenneth's over in the east. She's biding her time until she can run off with that lover of hers." "You're a fine one for accusations," Mary shouted back. "You who had your first husband murdered. Oh yes, Kenneth told me all about finding your letter of confession, and about how he threatened to show it up to the police unless you moved out." "Shut up, both of you," Ian said. "That's enough. You'll put the blame on all of us." "You're one to talk," Tina said acidly. "Those 3 years in prison didn't pay off your cronies. You still owe them money. How do we know you didn't murder Kenneth while trying to steal the saber?" "You need the blasted money as much as we do," Anita shouted, "to pay off your gambling debts. Without the estate, you've got nothing." "All right," Ian said, trying to end the squabble. "Listen to me. Now here's what happened. Kenneth came down here to take the saber, to stop anyone else from getting it. Someone was waiting in the shadows, a thief, see? He stabbed Kenneth with that knife and ran off. Indeed, there was a small knife stuck in the floor near the body, right near Emma's feet." "But who?" "None of us. An outsider. See what I mean?" They did. It was a plausible story that held the hope of their own innocence. They liked that. "But where's the key, Ian?" Mary insisted. "The key to the vault door. It was hidden, and only Kenneth knew where. If there was a struggle, it should be lying about." "Blast the key," Tina Cognac said. "We've got something better. We've got the one who murdered Kenneth." "We do?" Ian said. "Who was it?" "'Twas him." John Steele didn't really have to look to see who they were pointing to, but he did anyway, and of course found her finger practically pinning him to the spot. "Swell," he said. "The missus can prove it," Tina said. "Care to move aside, my lovely?" Emma didn't answer. She was still standing perfectly still, her feet glued to the spot near the body, but under the cold scrutiny of the others, she soon gave in. "Sorry, John," she said, taking a short step to the right. Once she did, it was clear why she'd been standing there in the first place. She was covering something with her shoes, hoping no one would notice it, something that had been carved into the wooden floorboards. Kenneth must have carved it with the knife as he was dying, Tina said. What he had carved were 2 letters. The letters were J.S., which could only stand for one person. Yet another vacation, John Steele thought, dampened with the prospect of the gallows. "Oh no," Steele said, "not again." "John, you promised," Emma pouted. "No, I didn't," he said. "Besides, there's a better explanation." He had been studying the situation and had come up with a different reading for the clues. "Sure there is," Ian said. "I've told the magistrate much the same thing myself. Many times. Someone discovered where the key was hidden," Steele began. "That person took it and came down here during the night to steal the saber." "He's right," Emma blurted out, as 2 events suddenly came into her mind. "The laird realised something was going on and came down to stop it." "But the thief stabbed him first," John continued. "That's when Kenneth carved the initials in the floor. They don't point to me, they point to one of you." "A nice little story," Ian McCourtney said. "But if Kenneth didn't stop them, then what did take the knife? What did the thief take? That's the saber there on the floor, just like the picture in the book. I'm afraid you've got nothing to show for all this fiction. On the contrary, Steele insisted. The truth is right here in front of us. The identity of the murderer, the method they used to get in the vault, and a clue to what was stolen. Here's the key, John said. It may have some interesting fingerprints on it. With a handkerchief over his hand, Steele bent down over the kerosene lantern. Then he carefully removed the knob used to adjust the wick. It was a skeleton key that fit perfectly into the vault door. Yes, but whose fingerprints? Ian McCourtney asked. Hers, Emma said, pointing happily back at Tina Cognac. She took the Jacobite saber from the vault, encountered the laird here and stabbed him with it. That's why there's no blood on the knife stuck on the floor. And that's the knife he used to carve her initials, TC, in the floor, John went on. While she was putting the key back in the lantern, when she saw the letters, knowing she couldn't erase them, she added lines at the bottom of each to turn them into JS. But the saber was still there on the ground, Mary said. Not quite, Emma said. She walked over to the spot on the floor near the stone wall where a chain was dangling and picked up a large purple gemstone. This must have fallen from the real saber during the struggle. It's the purple sapphire from the original. The one on the floor there is a fake. Tina had it made and switched it with the real one. Isn't that right, my lovely? But you didn't read the description in the book. You only copied the drawing and guessed at the kind of gems it contained. You guessed wrong. Tina gasped, like the sound from her throat when the noose had gotten too tight. Then she pushed past Emma Steele and ran for the exit, directly into the waiting arms of the constable, who was just descending the stairs. Saved again, Emma said proudly. Thanks for the help, John said. There's just one problem with our story. How did Kenneth know someone was breaking into the vault? Oh, John, you're losing your touch. That's an easy one. Kenneth said the ghost howled on the first day of each year, Emma explained. The same day, he came down to open the vault to pray for his ancestors. I figured the two events were connected. When he heard the howl last night, he knew someone had just opened the vault door. She demonstrated the theory by closing the door to the vault and then opening it. Sure enough, the devilish howl returned and raced through the corridors of the cellar. It was air, released by the opening and rushing down a hidden shaft inside a vault. And the ghost of Glenmore Castle, wind trapped in the tower above, having guarded its treasure, was free once more.